Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special event called How Can White People Support Black Power, hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee. Hello, my name is Hallie Murray. I'm a member of the National Central Committee of the African People's Solidarity Committee for the Northern Region, and we are under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. So before we get started, if you're tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe to get alerts whenever we go live or post a new video. If you are tuning in on Facebook, please share the live stream with your friends and family and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We'll have a question and answer period later in the program, so please take notes and put your comments in the chat on YouTube or Facebook or on Zoom in the Q&A feature. I'm really excited to get started today. So the African People's Solidarity Committee's our mandate is to organize other white people to build the movement for reparations and genuine solidarity with the liberation of African people. We salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who developed the political theory of African Internationalism and who represents the leadership of the African Revolution around the world. We salute Deputy Chair Onazine Yeshitela, who has put Chairman Omali Yeshitela's vision of the Black Power blueprint on the ground. She leads more than 50 economic institutions of the African People's Socialist Party. And we salute and welcome Chairwoman Penny Hess, Chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Chairwoman Penny was present when the African People's Socialist Party held the founding conference of the Solidarity Committee back in the fall of 1976. And she has been a cadre member of the African People's Solidarity Committee ever since then. In 2001, she published the groundbreaking book, Overturning the Culture of Violence, which under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, detailed the complicity and participation of white people in the historical assaults and colonial violence against African and other oppressed peoples. Today, APSC Chairwoman Penny Hess will use the theory of African internationalism, the theory of the African working class, created by the African People's Socialist Party Chairman Omali Yeshitela, to put forward how white people can take a principled stand with Black power. So right now, let us welcome Chairwoman Penny Hess. Uhuru, Penny, turning it over to you.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Hallie. Really appreciate that. And I really want to welcome everybody who's on this discussion tonight. And, if you have others that you want to tell about it, saluting everybody that's going to participate, but we've got to get tons of people. We've got to find and penetrate into the whole white society and win this question of genuine solidarity under the leadership of the African Revolution. So, I want to join by also saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Deputy Chair Onazine Yeshitela, under whose leadership we work, and the entire African People's Socialist Party, and all of the incredible African individuals who have dedicated their lives and made this commitment to liberate all African people everywhere, to free Africa, and to return African people to a state of self-government and self-determination, which they're in a process of doing. And we live in a society that tells us that we're supposed to bow down and our leaders would be the royals, as has been talked about lately, or the queen, or even the president, or celebrities. No, I think all of us that are here are saying, no way, that is not what we're about. We do not want to respect or uphold any leadership of this vicious imperialist white power system of colonialism that is in existence today, that we live under, capitalism and the United States built on genocide and the enslavement of African people. We salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We salute Deputy Chair Onazine Yeshitela, and the members of the African People's Socialist Party are our leaders who have taken it upon their shoulders to change the world, to end the system of the oppressors and the oppressed forever, and are, as we said, in the process of building an incredible new world in which all human beings can live, no one at the expense of anyone else. So I am the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization that was founded by the African People's Socialist Party back in 1976. How many years ago? That's well over 40 years ago. And that the goal of the party's founding of the African People's Solidarity Committee was to forward the strategy of the African Revolution, to extend the African Revolution behind enemy lines, as the chairman says, into the colonizer population, into the belly of the beast, for white people to be able to be Black power in whiteface. And this is our responsibility to do this, to win other white people to turn loose their whiteness, to end our relationship and our unity with our own ruling class, and to stand under the leadership of the African working class, which is the class that is the future of this planet. And so I think that is really incredible when we're talking about the origins of the Solidarity Committee and how it is that white people can support Black power, that this is something that goes very, very deep. And the African People's Solidarity Committee is an organization of cadre, of those of us who have made the commitment to do whatever is necessary or whatever is called for the African People's Socialist Party to be able to complete its African revolution and to bring down this capitalist system. So this is a very, very serious undertaking to be part of the African People's Solidarity Committee. And it's something that I want to talk to you about. I want to win you to, because we live in very serious times. Chairman Omali Yeshitela calls it the uneasy equilibrium, the struggle between the past and the future. And we see this crisis of imperialism unfolding every single day in so many ways, from the invasion by white people of the Capitol in January, the Trump administration, US wars abroad, the existence of the so-called antidote to Trump, which is Biden, who wrote the crime bill, who is one of the most proficient colonizing leaders on the planet today, that was responsible for 3 strikes you're out and the mass incarceration of African people that in this colonial prison system that we see, and has already been about bombing and extending drones and war against people in the Middle East and around the world, that is upholding this vicious system of imperialism born on the backs of African and oppressed peoples. So the understanding that Chairman Omali Yeshitela created an organization for white people, not leaving it up to us whether we would carry out the mission, the responsibility that they called on us to do, but putting us under their leadership and holding us accountable to our responsibility to carry out the strategy. So it also shows that the existence of the African People's Solidarity Committee is not charity. It's not a favor. It is taking on the challenge and the responsibility to play a role in the African Revolution and to unleash those stolen resources and the trillions of dollars in the form of reparations, which is about returning the stolen wealth into the hands of the revolutionary African working class. Now, these are some really profound questions. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela is always, every Sunday, he's leading political education. So if you haven't participated in that, I really urge you to do that. I urge you to read his books like Vanguard, The Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution, and so many other books by Chairman Omali Yeshitela to let us begin to see the world through the eyes of the African working class rather than through the eyes of the colonizer. So, there's some very deep and profound questions and ideas and concepts and understanding of reality that we're going to go into tonight, because we're used to seeing the world through a particular point of view, sitting on the pedestal, as the chairman calls it, on the pedestal built on the backs of African people and oppressed people who are the colonized. We are the colonizers of the world. And this is why we see the world and interpret it in a particular kind of way. But we can embrace African internationalism, the political worldview and political theory of the African People's Socialist Party that lets us begin to see the world through the eyes of the oppressed and colonized working class. So, also I want to say that the African People's Socialist Party has built a worldwide organization. It has the African People's Socialist Party in many countries throughout the world, including Africa, the Caribbean, throughout the United States, and in Europe, in many countries in Europe. And these parties altogether are called the African Socialist International, which is the coordinating body with the very, very clear and ambitious and, just soon to be victorious goal to win the total liberation of Africa and African people everywhere and control over Africa, removing the colonial borders and, just being able to see all the incredible wealth that is looted from Africa and has been for 600 years, that all of the wealth and the wealth of the stolen labor must be returned to African people so that they can build their infrastructure of their society. So we're going to be talking about that today. And so therefore, APSC is a function of the revolutionary strategy of the African Revolution. And this strategy is something that Chairman Omali has put out since the very, very beginning of the African People's Socialist Party way back in 1972, and even before that, that because it takes hard work to wage and win a revolution, and they're very serious about that. It takes strategy, it takes study, it takes longevity, it takes a fierce commitment and work on the ground every day, building up the infrastructure that must and is about replacing and negating the power and the infrastructure of imperialism, so that more and more through the work like the Black Power Blueprint and all of the 50 institutions, the African People's Socialist Party, all the different fronts of political and social institutions like Black community control of the police, the reparations tribunal, against the United States, indicting the United States government for genocide and calling for reparations, and so many other fronts of the African People's Socialist Party, these elections that are going on, the Black Power Blueprint creating political and economic power in the hands of the African working class is building and enlarging the power of the African Revolution, and thereby showing and educating people that they can take the power, that they can solve their own problems and are actually doing it. So, being under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party is one of probably, absolutely the most powerful and positive stance and ability to actually see the future unfolding. Really, the only future that's going to be able to save this planet and all human beings that want to go with it. So this is what the African People's Socialist Party and the strategy represents. And after the period of the Black Revolution of the 1960s, when revolution was, as the chairman says, the main trend in the whole world, and we saw the people of Vietnam kicking the ass of the United States, when we saw the Africans on the continent of Africa fighting against their colonial oppressor. And we saw China, Vietnam, Cuba, and other countries around the world successfully pushing back and overturning the colonial reality. We also saw in one of the most important revolutionary movements in the entire world, the anti-colonial revolution led by the African working class inside the borders of the United States that was destabilizing, and the United States government itself called it the greatest internal threat to the US government since the Civil War, and recognized the seriousness of that, created a counterinsurgency, which is the colonizers' war without terms against the oppressed people who are rising up for their freedom, for justice, for their liberation, for self-government, which is the only just thing that can happen. But the US and Britain and the colonizers fight back with a vicious war that does anything. It has no Geneva Convention. It can murder people, it can torture, it can lock people up for life, as we see happened in the United States with the political prisoners from that period, like Sundiata Acoli and so many others, Mumia, who are still locked up today. And this government is very, very serious about killing them. And as we see with Mumia at this time. And, so this is the counterinsurgency. And we have to really understand that the Black Revolution, the African Revolution, the period of the Black Power movement of the 1960s did not just end. It didn't end because people got tired of it. It ended because there was a counterinsurgency that assassinated the leaders of that movement and imprisoned other leaders and destroyed organization. And the United States government was very clear that this was an anti-colonial movement, even as the white left and others denied that completely. So Chairman Omali Yeshitela was the last man standing, as they say. He was the one who was able to sum up that period. What happened? How can African people win the next time around? How to sum up all the problems and contradictions that were not understood, or errors that were made, and to create a strategy and a political theory that is winning. And it is winning today. It is pushing back this counterinsurgency and building the ability of African people to be free and defeat US imperialism, the enemy of the majority of the people on the planet Earth once and for all. So the chairman had to solve the problems of the revolution. And one of them, left over from the 60s, was what to do about the white people. And, we can look at our history, we can see that white people have carried out state power, that we have lynched, we have murdered, we have tortured, we have done every possible kind of inflicted violence against African people in every possible way, in a way to maintain the colonial status that we have over them. And we look at this history, and it is hideous, our role that we have played. And we have had state power because we have been immune. We haven't had to pay a price for what we have done to African people and for the genocide that we participated in and carried out against the indigenous people. And even to see now, the only reason that one or two cops, killer cops, are even on trial is because of the resistance of African people forcing that question, and because of the incredible analysis of the reality of colonialism inside the borders of the United States and the colonial state that has been put forward by Chairman Omali Yeshitela for the last 50 years and more. So the chairman solved the problems, and he has gone up against the strong headwinds of the times after the counterinsurgency, after the defeat of the African Revolution. And he created this organization of white people under the leadership of the party and are, holding us accountable. And I was fortunate enough, and I think it was just, I don't know why, it was almost, historical accident, but I was there in 1976 at the founding conference of the African People's Solidarity Committee that was held in St. Petersburg, Florida, back there and led by the chairman. And after I heard the analysis and the understandings put forward and the vision for the future put forward by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the party, I could never walk away from that. And I could only begin to start to see the world as it really is and how it got to be there. Because where, is there good news of this system? Every day there's war, there's suffering, there's terror, there's just total injustice. There's this thing exposed, and what it means in mass incarceration and millions of African people being locked up to such an extent that there's only 80, in some places, 80 African men for every African woman in this country. The injustice of all of the children in the richest country in the world growing up in poverty in the African community without the ability ever to change that under the system that exists now, because African communities are being looted every single day by the system, as T'Challa and President Kalambai here in St. Louis have laid out in their political campaign platforms as they're running for aldermen in the city. So, we can look around, we can see this reality, and we can begin to see this world as it really is. And to me, when I joined APSC, that was just an incredible eye-opener. I couldn't not see it. How can you walk away from that? This is the reality. This is suffering everywhere you go. Is that what we're supposed to do? Live our lives walking over the bodies of African people and the world and go ahead and seek fill our stomachs and our pocketbooks and reach our dreams and aspirations that come at the expense of others. And, another one of the critical questions that was left unsolved, that the chairman did solve, was absolute, profound definition that the problem facing African people inside the US today and anywhere that African people have been forcibly dispersed around the world is colonialism. Colonialism means the domination of a whole people by a foreign and alien state power for profit and backed up by the state. That is what the state is. That's how the state enforces this oppression upon African people inside the borders of this country. And I think that, the lesson of the party, that it's not enough to protest. We have to answer the question, to what end, as the chairman says. Not enough to unlearn racism, the self-defeating waste of time that upholds this system, that says the system can be made better. But there's no way that this vat of poison can ever be turned into something positive. It was born this way. It was born of the assault on Africa, the turning of African human beings into commodities for sale, and for a whole international trade that was built on the backs of African people, and the genocide that was carried out against the indigenous people here that we were responsible for. 80% of the actual genocide was carried out by white civilians in this country, just as the enforcement of the system of slavery and colonialism inside this country has been enthusiastically carried out by white people, no matter how poor, coming from Europe, very clear that all they had to do was step up on the backs of African people and walk up this ladder of success. So as the chairman says, we sit on this pedestal. We have participated in the most vicious of crimes against humanity. We owe reparations. We are about winning reparations, not only from ourselves, but from the ruling class, as we've been called on to do by the party, and return that stolen wealth of the world into the hands of the producers. And because we are the colonizer, we must be under the leadership of the colonized. We have always betrayed the African Revolution. We have always betrayed African people in every possible way. That's called opportunism. And that's what the colonizer nation is, opportunistic in any way, using anything, any means whatsoever to feed ourselves, our family, to get wealth, and to justify it through this narrative of the colonizer, these lies, the story that justifies to ourselves and our own brain what we do in the lifestyle that we live every day. So I wanted to read a little bit from Vanguard. I think this is available for people to read. And this is from the chairman's book, Vanguard. It is in his section called The Theory of African Internationalism. On page 287, the chairman says, Europe's attack on Africa was effectively an assault on Africa's ability to produce life for itself. This assault has had the effect of pushing Africa and Africans out of history. History being the summation of the ongoing struggle to produce and reproduce real life. I mean, I hope that's clear. I just want that to be clear, because he's saying that this assault on Africa that gave us the European identity, gave us the white identity, that we are tied to this relationship in a dialectical relationship with African people and the oppressed people of the world. Just really think about that. They have to be colonized for us to live the life we live. It's not a sad, oh, we're so sorry when we look at that. That's very sad. We'll send 50 cents for a child in Africa. No, the conditions of African people are necessary for the conditions of white America, Europe, and white people wherever we have been gone around the world to pursue the ability to be the colonizer. And this has, as the chairman said, pushed Africans out of history. I mean, that's just so profoundly true. You know, until the fierce struggle of African people, until the leadership and political struggle led by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African Revolution, Africans weren't in history. There wasn't any statement of the fact that the enslavement of African people created the greatest wealth up into that period that has ever been created on the planet Earth through the incredible violence and viciousness, brutality waged against African people every day and carried out by us and continued through colonialism today to even greater extent. That's not talked about. The whole experience of African people, the two Americas, the poverty, the understanding, as here in St. Louis, that at least 30% of the African working class living on the North Side is forced to live after taxes on $5 a day a person for a family of four. You know, we don't relate to that. That is not, you know, in our life that we see that. And if there are, and certainly there are poor white people, I'm not denying that, but there is social wealth inside the United States for the white population that enables, these are statistics and you can look them up, a poor white family to raise $1,000 or even $3,000 in the face of a crisis more easily than the African middle class that has work, because they have no social wealth. That we have the social wealth of inheritances and down payments on houses and property and all kinds of things that are passed down from generation to generation and then actually increase in value over time. So the chairman is saying slavery, genocide, and colonialism are the stuff of which capitalism was born. African enslavement was the first capital in the development of capitalism. Because you don't start, today, you don't start a business without an infusion of capital. Well, how did capitalism itself start? It had to have an infusion of capital, and that was the stolen labor of African people, the stolen resources of Africa, the stolen land of the indigenous people and everywhere, and the resources and all of the natural minerals and natural resources of India, of Southeast Asia, of all of the majority of the people on the planet Earth. So the chairman is saying again that African enslavement, which began in 1415 as Portugal assaulted Africa and first took out 700 tons of gold from Africa before 1500, and then began the assault on African human beings. This is the first capital. This is what Marx calls the primitive accumulation of capital, or the first accumulation of capital. So the chairman is saying the prevailing legal system, culture, religion, and general philosophical outlook or worldview constitute the superstructure of capitalism thus conceived. So everything, all of the infrastructure, all of the structure sitting on top of this pedestal on the backs of African people, that is the education system, the school system, the religion, all of white society, all the things that we take for granted, the entertainment business, the film industry, all of the things that create and generate and perpetrate and perpetuate the ideas of capitalism and reinforce it and justify it. So the chairman is saying the prevailing legal system, the culture, the religion, and general philosophical outlook or worldview constitute the superstructure of capitalism thus conceived. This superstructure is a natural product and reflection of this economic base of colonial slavery. Slavery and colonialism gave rise not only to capitalism, but also to the capitalists and working classes alike of Europe. And I want to repeat that because, and by the way, if you didn't see the chairman's presentation this afternoon on the whole question of Meghan Markle, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, but you've got to see it. It's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, on his page, it's on the Burning Spear. It's really, really profound. It's very, very exciting, where the chairman talks about feudalism and what it is that transformed Europe from a feudal system into capitalism, which was and still is the colonial domination of Africa, the theft of African people, and the colonial domination of the majority of the earth. So the chairman is saying slavery and colonialism gave rise not only to capitalism, but also to the capitalists and working classes alike in Europe. So again, from feudalism, the class system arose, but it wasn't just the ruling class. It wasn't just the white ruling class. It wasn't just the royals. It was also the peasants of Europe were transformed into the working class, and the feudal system was destroyed in this process. So both the working class and the ruling class sit on this pedestal, and that is why white workers have, generally speaking, profound unity with their own ruling classes. And that is something that we, as the African People's Solidarity Committee, have to take on and challenge and win white working people to recognize our true interests, which is under the leadership of the African Revolution, which is the leadership of the world revolution. And that's why we have to be organized. So the chairman said, the workers and the bourgeoisie, the two primary capitalism defining classes, have occasionally fought great battles with each other since their inception as contending social forces. Nevertheless, both were born and developed on a platform of slavery and colonialism. Consequently, what is called class struggle inside the US and Europe is actually contention among the workers and the ruling class for control of the parasitic capitalist pedestal and its stolen resources. Is that, if you have any questions on this, please put it down, put it in the chat so we can talk about it. So this is why we see that Europeans have never led a revolution against our ruling class. White workers have fought for more power and more equal, quote unquote, distribution of the stolen loot from the colonial domination of everybody else, to sit at the table with the ruling class, to have more of the crumbs that they would give us. And that this is the opportunism that we're talking about. So the parasitic foundation of world capitalism continues to exist up to now as the true economic base upon which the entire superstructure of the capitalist-defined, capitalist-dominated world rests. The total existence of white people and their ability to produce and reproduce life is dependent, which the chairman says is the motive force of the existence of society, of civilization, is dependent on this parasitic relationship that came into being with the attack by feudal Europe on Africa and the world. That is so profound that the only way that we can produce life is for Africans to not be able to produce life, that they produce life and reproduce life for us. They have their stolen labor, they created wealth, they built the high-rise buildings and the streets and the roads and all of the labor, and went down into the mines and brought up the resources on this stolen land. This is what it means that African people have not had control over their ability to live, to feed themselves, to have self-determination, and use their resources for their own, and even the benefit of their labor for themselves. And they are very determined to take that back and regain control. How could, if we look at this and we could kind of imagine, 100 years from now, or even 50 years from now, the whole idea of capitalism will certainly be recognized as one of the most barbaric and backwards and hideous systems that has ever existed on the planet Earth. And, it's like we can't be lulled to sleep in it. We have to take on a responsibility to end this. It's not enough to just not like the system. It really isn't. And it is, I know that the African People's Solidarity Committee, I'm not saying that it's for every person, but all of us have to play a role. But some of us have to agree to go all the way, because we are a front of the African Revolution, a flank of the African Revolution inside of the belly of the beast. And we have an important place, an important job that we have to carry out, and there have to be the people that do that. And when I look at, the history of the 1960s and see, the millions of Vietnamese people who gave their lives to win freedom and independence for the whole people, led by the African working class, or see all of the Africans that fought and died in Africa against colonialism, and see all of the people of China who fought and went on that long march for a year, and with 90,000 100,000 people or more that died in that process because they wanted to be free. And we can see that this is a period of neo-colonialism now, in which white power uses and is the puppeteer of sellout or forces, petty bourgeois forces from the African population and from other colonized people, every colonized people, to carry out the wishes of white power. That was a pretty smart move on their part, but the African People's Socialist Party has been exposing this for the last 50 years and more, and that day is over. That day is over, and we can see that playing out more and more in the just incredible work that the party is doing, and the mass consciousness of the African population to overturn neo-colonialism and all of the puppets of imperialism who have been their agents and participated in the oppression of African people. And by the way, the neo-colonialists are almost always supported by the white leftists. So the chairman is saying that instead of separate, more or less self-contained worlds existing in casual relationship with each other, there is one capitalist world system united by a parasitic economic relationship imposed by Europe upon the rest of us. There is therefore no European reality separate from that of Africa and the rest of the world. The entire world now is locked into a single dialectical process, a unity of opposites, whereupon the gruesome extraction of life and resources from Africa and the rest of the world is the condition for the life and development of what we now know as Europe, white people, and the capitalist system to which we have been forcibly affixed. The legal system, the culture, the white sense of sameness, and political institutions are reflections of this parasitic economic base. Every white aspiration and dream, every expectation for happiness and for a good life, from a successful marriage to a secure future for their children, requires drone strikes in Pakistan, police murders and mass imprisonment in the African colonies and barrios of the US, and starvation and forced displacement of the oppressed throughout the world. That is the reality of colonialism, depended upon the oppression and exploitation of African people and people on planet Earth. That is a description of the pedestal, what the chairman and African Internationalism calls the pedestal upon which we sit on the backs of the oppressed African, indigenous, and colonized people of the planet Earth. That's why APSC has to be under the leadership of the African Revolution led by the African working class. That's why. I mean, that makes total sense. We can't do anything but be opportunists. Left to our own devices, we are going to betray the African Revolution. That will happen. That would happen if we weren't under the leadership. And that did happen. Even inside of APSC, it took about 9 years actually, of struggle by the party with us to win us to become ourselves African internationalists. And at a certain point, which we must be. It was, even though there were times when we did good work, or we won reparations, or we could say good speeches, write articles, and they were good, but yet we weren't African internationalists. It's really hard to explain that, but I want to try, because we have to see the world in the same way. This is not charity, it's not a favor. We have to be able to come to the same conclusions, that we have to be part of organization. Imperialism has to go. The colonizer has to jump off the pedestal on the backs of the colonized and can only do that through an organizational relationship under the leadership of the African working class. And I hope this is clear. I hope we can really talk about this, because we don't get an opportunity in this society to really talk about how the world got to be the way it is and what it is that we have to do to go forward. And I see all kinds of people saying, well, we just have to reform the police, or we just have to stop the carbon emissions. We have to stop fossil fuels, and we just have to, stop bombing, and we have to get rid of nuclear power and nuclear bombs. And what are you talking about? I mean, first of all of that is what capitalism is. It's not going to change that. And if it does stop one thing because of some mass protest, it will only make something more insidious, believe me, because it is the nature of this system to do anything possible that it needs to do, that it wants to do. It has no oversight on what it can do to African people and others who are colonized to get the profit, to do what it has to do. I mean, look at what's happening in Congo right now. That Apple, Dell, all of these cell phone manufacturers from the US and computer makers are funding, and the United States government itself are funding proxy forces that come from neighboring countries, neo-colonial countries, created armies and funded and trained proxy armies to carry out the will of the US to control the land and the resources especially of the Eastern Congo, which has every resource on the planet Earth, where 80-something% of the coltan exists. This is going on right now. This is what we're talking about. Or inside here of St. Louis, where, as we said, African workers live on $5 a day, where the prisons are full of African people based on a colonial system that gives African people 500 times the sentence that white people would get. And white people don't even get it, because the majority of the time, if white people are arrested for drugs, they're not even going to go to jail. In fact, now that we see an opioid pandemic going on inside of the white society, we see all this outpouring of support and understanding that this is a disease and it needs to be treated, not treated with helicopters flying over, trained dogs and SWAT teams breaking down the doors of the African community, which has been going on for the last, since the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s, since the time that the US government itself has flooded the African communities with crack cocaine and deadly drugs. So I just want to read a little bit more. This is from a book written in 1991 by the chairman after the, I think it was the third Congress of the party, the third Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, and it's called Izweletu I Africa, which means in African language that Africa is their land. Africa belongs to African people, is what that means. So the chairman said, he wrote about why the party started the African People's Solidarity Committee, and he said, it has been the theory of primitive accumulation which has led the party to a deeper understanding of the implications of our colonial situation in the struggle for socialism within current US North American borders. And I just want to be clear that the struggle for socialism is led by the African working class. And the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party, which is a party of the African working class, its mission is to not only free and liberate Africa, but also its identity as a part of the struggle against imperialism and colonialism in the Americas, its relationship to the indigenous people. And the party is absolutely clear and unequivocal on the fact that this land, from Alaska to the tip of Chile, in North America, South America, Caribbean, belong to the indigenous people. They belong to the indigenous people. This is their land that has never changed. This is indigenous land. So when we talk about socialism, we're not talking about, Chairman's not talking about Bernie Sanders or $15 an hour, as the chairman says. This is about African workers having power over their lives, and colonized workers and peasants having control of the means of the production, which is just what the chairman is saying, to be able to produce and reproduce life for themselves, for their people, their ability to live, to prosper, to have control over their intellectual property, their talents, every single aspect of what it is that must be returned to African people. So the chairman says it has been the theory of primitive accumulation combined with our struggles to resolve the contradictions within the solidarity movement. And like I said, within the solidarity movement, there were struggles. We were not consolidated as an organization, and we moved in our early days in a very opportunistic way. And we had to be one. And when we were one, we became African Internationalists. And we began to say that, that there's a certain way that the party doesn't have to tell us what to do, because we come to the same conclusion. Yeah, that's what we're called on to do. Go into the white population and win reparations, turn back over the stolen resources so that African people can be free and be liberated, and the system can be wiped off the map forever. And so the chairman has said that, it's been these struggles within the solidarity movement and other things that have led the African People's Socialist Party to understand that the structured relationship between the party and the African People's Solidarity Committee is exactly correct. It's exactly correct that we would be under the leadership of the party. It is a concrete reflection of our theoretical understanding of the political and social reality presented to us by capitalism and colonialism in the US. The party has always understood that no theory for the liberation of our people can be subordinate to the promise, quote unquote, of North American or white solidarity. It may be necessary to win our liberation independent of any strategical relationship with progressive North American forces. Our struggle for independence, so he's saying that they're prepared. They're prepared to fight, whether white people are there or not. But if white people can be there, that extends the African Revolution. And we can do this. I know that we have members, and Uhuru Solidarity Movement has members in 148 cities, 30 states. We're building in Europe, we're building in other places in the world. White people see there is no future with this vicious, horrible system, and what the relationship that we are expected to have with it. So the chairman says, our struggle for independence through self-liberation, thanks to the primitive accumulation factor, will undoubtedly set the vast majority of North Americans against us, creating the probability for our struggle for independence assuming the form of race war. But they don't want to do that. They want to fight the US government. They don't want to fight white people, except to the extent that we have been the government. But many of us, millions of us, showed after the rebellions and the uprising, after the police murder of George Floyd in this last year, many millions of white people marched in support for whatever reason, many for the first time ever. But it's not enough to just do that, to just protest. We have to be part of building the infrastructure of the liberated African economy and society. But it does show that white people can be one, that even the majority perhaps of the white population is not the Trump supporters, are white people who want to be on the side and have a principled relationship and make the self-criticism to the African population and oppressed peoples of the world, and do not want to be the colonizer, do not want to be in a position to be the policeman, the Marines, and all of the things that we've taken it upon ourselves to do. And so the chairman says, moreover, as socialists, we had to face the practical problem, which is blocking the struggle for socialism inside the current US borders, mainly domestic colonialism of African people. Indeed, the struggle to defeat domestic colonialism is the fundamental practical problem confronting every genuine socialist within current US borders. Therefore, it became clear to us that the political and strategical basis for the existence of APSC and its ideological and structural relationship to the party were also grounded in a firm theoretical basis. It is a theoretical basis which is consistent with our long-time perceptual understanding that a victorious struggle against colonialism would provide the basis for the conditions of a struggle for socialism. And, so this is very, very profound. The question of colonialism is the absolute question today. And I just want to say a couple more things, and then I'm going to wrap this up, and people, we can have a discussion and people can raise questions. But in the chairman's address to the African nation today, he was saying the description of colonized people as people of color is so dishonest. It is an attempt to say that we are all the same, but we are the colonized and the white people are the colonizers. African people are a nation of people. They say we're all citizens, so we won't rise up. African people have to rise up in the same way that white people overturned feudalism. We have to attempt to hide that this is an attempt to hide the total domination of the people when we just use terms like racism or people of color, rather than the fact that African people are a nation of people, forcibly dispersed around the world, as the chairman has said. And I wanted to just say also that 10 years before the formation of the African People's Solidarity Committee in 1976, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee went through a process in attempting to define the question of white people and the relationship that white people would have to SNCC, as it was called. And SNCC underwent a profound transformation from the early 60s to the mid 60s, as the chairman describes, from a civil rights organization into a Black Power organization as the African working class struggle rose up around the United States, especially in the urban African working class areas and cities. So in 1966, a committee of SNCC called the Vine City, which is an African neighborhood of Atlanta, or the Atlanta Project, issued a statement because white people could be in SNCC. They could just be a member, an equal member of SNCC. And so at this time, this whole question of the anti-colonial nature of the struggle for power, not the struggle for civil rights or against racism, but the struggle for power on the part of the African community led by the African working class came to a head. And so there was this faction, especially based around this Atlanta project of SNCC, that wanted to evict all of the white people from SNCC, all the white people who actually were physically there as members. And this was a very historic thing. So they issued a statement saying this. And I just thought that, we can see 10 years before some of the questions that the chairman has formulated were being put out and struggled around and struggled to understand. So the statement by the Vine City or Atlanta Project said that, quote, Black people are considered as citizens along the same lines as white people in this country. This is in 1966, when in reality, Black people are, as they called it, a semi-colonized people, victims of domestic colonialism, something the chairman just talked about that I just read. Our introduction into this country occurred during the same time as the partition of Africa and Asia by the European powers, so that the American institution of slavery was too a form of Western colonialism. Therefore, Black people in this country are reacting the same way as do other colonial peoples to their environment and experience. But the myths of America label them as citizens, which is an unreal attitude. Just as the chairman has summed up, and the paper says, it is very ironic and curious how aware, quote unquote, whites in this country can champion anti-colonialism in other countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America. But when Black people move towards similar goals of self-determination in this country, they are viewed, meaning African people, are viewed as racist and anti-white by these same progressive whites. So, this was clearly a question unsolved, left unsolved, from the previous period that the chairman took on, deepened, provided an answer to, not just on paper and in theory, but because SNCC did evict its white members, it sent them back to the white community to organize on their own, excuse me, to organize in solidarity with the African revolution that was going on then. But white people did not do that. Nothing happened in that way, left to our own devices. And so the chairman was able to sum up all the contradictions, all of the errors left unsolved, solved it. And one of the really important ones was putting white people organizationally under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party with the same understandings of African internationalism to guide us and to carry out the work strategically, assigned to us by the African Revolution. So, I want to, excuse me, I want to call on people, to really open up and just, ponder the profound nature of what we have just read and talked about, and what the African working class is bringing us to, because our way of thinking is, it's just so covered over, and so, our brains are so fogged by the system that justifies the white narrative, the white colonial narrative every day. And white people, I think a lot of white people are very unhappy, don't want to be part of this, but they don't know the way forward. And I want to call on everybody here tonight to be a member, if you can, to join, to really think about joining the level of the African People's Solidarity Committee, to be a revolutionary in the truest sense, to carry out whatever is needed to be done to forward the African revolution on our front, to win reparations. You can't be a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, be a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, or just be a donor, a supporter, an NTU member, however, you can do that. But we must be organized. It's not enough to be a consumer of information that does not change the world. It is not enough to sit around a cafe and just discuss this outside of the whole doing the work that is needed to make these ideas a reality that we can do, we are doing. We have so many amazing comrades who are members of the African People's Solidarity Committee. You just have great company when you join it. And I really, just really excited about this discussion tonight. I want to open it up and thank you so much for participating and being part of this and being challenged by the world, seeing the world as it really is, not as we want it to be, through the eyes of the African working class that is creating the future for all human beings, no one at the expense of anyone else. So uhuru and unity through reparations, and vanguard up, as the party says.
Uhuru, wow, thank you so much, Chairwoman Penny Hess. That was really powerful. We're gonna need some time to digest everything. You know, it's really powerful what you're saying. I unite with your call to join APSC. And I just want to remind folks that we will be doing a question and answer period shortly. So please submit your questions or comments in the Q&A feature on Zoom at the bottom of the screen. Also, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can enter them in the comments there, and we have someone who's reading them to bring to us tonight. So before we go into the questions, we want to hear from Jesse Neville, who is chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, who will say how you can apply and why you should apply to join the African People's Solidarity Committee and why you should consider joining tonight. So Uhuru, Jesse, thank you.
Uhuru. I really, really appreciate the study done by Chairwoman Penny Hess. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Penny, for the incredible leadership and the profound and very inspiring political education on the theory of African internationalism, the worldview of the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela that you just took us through. And that was just really eye-opening and incredible. So just really want to thank you on behalf of everyone who's watching. And I want to unite with the way that you ended your presentation by saying that this is not just about consuming information. This is not just about a talk fest or being able to win a debate. This is a call to action to us in the white community. And as Chairwoman Penny Hess said, the African People's Solidarity Committee is not necessarily for everyone. All of us have to play a role in this revolution under the leadership of the African working class. And there's many different ways that we can do that. But some of us have to make a commitment to go all the way. And that's the call that we are making, that Chairwoman Penny is making, that the African People's Socialist Party is making to white people when we are being called upon to join the African People's Solidarity Committee. And I want to encourage you, go to your browser right now and go to apscuhuru.org/join. This is how you join. You go to APSC, as in African People's Solidarity Committee, Uhuru, UHURU.org/join. Go to that website, fill out that intake form, and you will have officially begun your journey into membership in the African People's Solidarity Committee. You will be contacted within 24 hours by a representative of the National Office of Recruitment and Membership, and you will be sent an application, and you will have an interview, and then you will be brought into a sponsorship process. There's a 6-month sponsorship process. Right now, there are a few people in that sponsorship process, so now is a good time to join because you will not be alone in the sponsorship process. You will be part of a group sponsorship, which is really awesome, really exciting. It's training, it's deeper political education. We go through every different aspect of what it means to be part of this organization, from the 14-point platform of the party, the political theory of African internationalism, the party rules of discipline, the history of the party, how to organize. We study the organizational manual. It is a 6-month, boot camp to become a revolutionary. The only way that white people can become revolutionaries, which is by joining the African People's Solidarity Committee. So it's a thrilling process. It's an exhilarating process. It's a life-changing process. And it's one that I definitely understand if it is a decision that you do not come to lightly. And I respect that because it wasn't a decision I came to lightly. I was a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement for about a year before I finally decided to take the plunge and join the African People's Solidarity Committee. And it was absolutely the most meaningful, life-changing, and positive thing I have ever done in my life. That was about 10 or 11 years ago. I have never looked back. It has been an incredible experience, and the revolution is growing and winning. And I just want to salute the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela for the brilliance and the strategy and the victory of building the Solidarity Front of the African Revolution. I want to salute Deputy Chair Onizene Yeshitela and all of the leaders of the African People's Socialist Party stretched across the globe who are fighting every single day to free Africa and unite African people everywhere under the leadership of the African working class. I want to salute Chairwoman Penny Hess, who has modeled this stance for, 45 years, just courageous leadership under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the party, exemplifying what white solidarity with Black power looks like at the highest level. And I want to salute you, and especially those of you who are considering and who are going right now to apscuhuru.org/join and making that decision, making that choice that will completely change your life and bring you into the company of the human family throughout the world community of oppressed and exploited peoples. We can become one with the Vietnamese, the Chinese that Chairwoman Penny spoke of, the Palestinians, the Africans, the indigenous people, the Mexican people. We can become connected with them in a principled way for the first time through membership in the African People's Solidarity Committee. So join. If you united with what you heard in this study tonight, join the African People's Solidarity Committee. This organization is for you. Go to apscuhuru.org/join, fill out the form, and you will hear from us within 24 hours. This is the party's time. We got to bring every resource, all the resources stolen from African people for hundreds of years must go back to the African Revolution. And we have to bring in the human resources of white people ourselves by joining the African People's Solidarity Committee and doing our part to kick the ass of the white ruling class. So Uhuru, unity through reparations, join the African People's Solidarity Committee today. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Jesse. If I wasn't already a member, I would totally join again right now from that mobilizing speech. So yeah, just really appreciate all our presenters tonight, Chairman Penny and USM Chair Jesse. I just want to do a quick shout out to where our audience is watching from. So in the North region, we have folks in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm right here in Somerville, Massachusetts at our Uhuru Planet studio, Chester, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, Maryland, and Philadelphia. In the Midwest, there's Louisville, Kentucky, Minneapolis, Minnesota, St. Louis, Missouri, home of the Black Power Blueprint. In the South, we have St. Petersburg, Florida. And in the West region, San Diego, California, and Spokane, Washington. And okay, so we have a couple questions here. There's still time if you want to put them in the chat. Any questions or comments, would love to hear from them. So Ra in Chester, Pennsylvania had this comment, Penny, when you were talking about the conditions of colonialism, they said, amazing how I have people around me, Black and white, that really believe that we can look past these things when these things are alive and thriving. Okay, and then, or any comments on that?
Sorry, I was talking away, but I was muted. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. That's what we are expected to do, to look away, not see it, to pretend it's not there. And, I think that, isn't that the basis of mental illness, to just look at huge suffering and say that, oh, this is great. We live in a great society. And I do think that, a lot of people want to wish it away. And that's what the chairman was saying, that, just to struggle against racism is, as the chairman says, self-defeating waste of time, because you and I could, sit around and just have this luxury of going to a class to unlearn our thoughts. But, and we maybe will spend $1,000 doing that. And maybe we'll spend a whole weekend or doing something like that. But what has changed? We drive back to our same neighborhood. African people are still being gunned down in the streets. colonialism is still there. The prisons are still chock full. Nothing has changed. And it's not about that. That's why the African People's Socialist Party is saying it's not about racism. We don't care what you think of us, the chairman said. What we care about is what you carry out in the world, the work you do, the strategy for African liberation that we can carry out, behind enemy lines. So as the chairman says, our assignment, winning reparations, turning the resources back over. And in the process of carrying out a strategic responsibility of the African Revolution, we do undergo transformation as human beings. I mean, that's how you truly unlearn ideas in your head, is by being in a worldview of the oppressed, of doing the work every day to change the world literally, and to create the material conditions under which a new world is growing up before our very eyes. So yeah, I mean, we just can't look at this and walk away anymore, or say that it's not what it is. We have to call it for what it is. And it's a brutal, vicious, horrible system. And I do think that if a lot of white people are addicted to drugs or have mental illness, which is very rampant in the white society, I think that it's from living this world that we have to deny the truth in. And we have to, we don't want to be here. We don't know how to change it. Many of us don't, but this is the ability to actually be part of changing the world under the leadership of the African working class of the world.
Aru, thank you, Penny, for that. So another question from an anonymous attendee on Zoom. The chairman has talked about the struggle among the white population for control of the stolen resources. With that in mind, can you talk about unions and the labor movement? Is a strong labor movement important, and how do they relate to our work, if at all?
Well, thank you. That's a good question, Anonymous. And I think that the question, first of all, if we understand what the chairman is saying, that the true working class of the world is in the colonies. It's the African working class. It's the oppressed and colonized working class around the world. That white people may work, but white people are colonizers. All of us are. And I think that it is very much something that the African People's Socialist Party has been about, is upholding African labor and upholding African workers, and sees African labor unions as really important. And I think that perhaps there could be African-led labor unions with white workers under the leadership of that. But I want to say that what's called the labor movement, as it truly actually exists in reality, has been historically one of the places of serious opportunism on the part of white people, and one of the fronts where this whole question of colonialism is wiped out, because generally a labor union is influenced by the white left or the Communist Party, and it has a slogan like "Black and white unite and fight," or some other kind of thing. And if you look at the history, I was just reading the history of St. Louis recently in this book called Broken Heart of America. And, just the way that white workers and unions sold out the African community, to the extent that were responsible for Africans being gunned down. And, this whole horrible, I think it was 1918 white mob in East St. Louis across the river that just slaughtered maybe a couple of hundred of African people, was in a whole labor struggle that white people, came out fine for, but African people were sacrificed. And this has happened. There's so many examples of that. The way that, that the owners of factories would use a strike by white people, by white workers, where Africans might have a chance to work for the first time in their lives, but then they were crossing the picket line, so they were being attacked by white workers and white labor. I mean, there's so many examples of this in history, and some of it we talk about in the book, Overturning the Culture of Violence. So the whole question of the labor movement, a genuine labor movement of African workers and the interests of the African working class in taking power, will be extremely important, and a really important front of the African Revolution. But the labor movement in the US is just an example of colonial opportunism and betrayal of the African working class over and over again to get things that we wanted, white workers wanted, at the expense of African people. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Penny, thanks for that. So Ken on YouTube says, if Europeans care about African race folks, then put your money to our banks. The power structure will end racism the next day. America only cares about money, period.
That you're saying that they'll say that I wasn't totally clear. Could you read that again?
Just a comment. More, I guess they're saying, like, if Europeans care about African race folks, then put your money into our banks. And then the power structure will end racism the next day, because America only cares about money. So basically, like, should we put white people put our money into the banks of Black people? I guess that could be the question from there.
Well, I mean, the thing is that this whole system rests on the foundation of the enslavement of African people. That's where banks got the trillions of dollars. Banks and brokerage firms. I mean, they were Lloyd's of London insured enslaved African people as cargo for white people. Insurance companies and all of this came from Wall Street. That's what we're called on to take on right now is that the white ruling class has to pay reparations. So the thing is that it's never going to give that up. It's never going to give. I mean, it can do certain things or say certain things or make certain changes that would be so-called progressive, but they're never going to end up being parasitic, blood-sucking capitalists, sucking the blood of the people on the planet Earth. Uhuru,
thanks. That's a sync in the background because I'm in our studio. So another comment on Facebook from Deborah. I was happy to hear today that once Biden signs the bill on Friday, it's going to include something like $40 billion for Black farmers.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think 90% of African farmland has already been stolen. And I'm pretty sure it's 90%. And most of that was stolen by white people who lived next door, and they changed the property lines and the city upheld it, just in typical kind of way. But I mean, it's not going to be power. They're forced to do certain things now because of the incredible uprisings of African people, because of the understandings of the African People's Socialist Party. But it's still going to be colonialism. Let's just say that. African people are not going to have control over their lives. The US might give a certain amount of money. They can take it away anytime they want. That the system, that's the basis of the colonial system. Uhuru.
And there's one more comment from Gregory in Grand Rapids, Michigan on YouTube asks, how does this group, Uhuru Solidarity, merge with the Burning Spear TV?
With the Burning Spear what?
The Burning Spear TV. It might mean
merge with it. Well, that is the Burning Spear is the political journal or the newspaper of the African People's Socialist Party that's been coming out since the 1960s. So Burning Spear TV is their YouTube channel, and that's where the chairman's studies and his addresses to the African nation on Wednesdays are there, and many, many incredible presentations, including the chairman's presentation at Oxford. Just so many great presentations of the chairman. You can have an incredible political education by going to Burning Spear TV, but that is the party's main channel. And we do have the channel, I assume this is on Uhuru Solidarity Movement channel that you're watching this. So, we have a solidarity channel, which is under the leadership of the party. So, but absolutely, we put forward and, just read and support and sell the Burning Spear newspaper, Black Power 96 radio, and all the books and all the fronts of the party's agitation and propaganda, which owns and controls the Burning Spear TV. Yeah, so you can go to burningspear.com or theburningspear.com to get the Burning Spear. All right.
Thank you, Penny. So that looks like our questions for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for contributing. And before we move into announcements and end our program, Penny, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yes, I do. I think that the campaign of a member of the African People's Socialist Party, Herdosha Kalambai Andanet, who is also the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, is going to the general election. She came through the primary, which was a couple of weeks ago, and she's going to the general election, which will be April 6th. And it's absolutely history making because she's running along with Tichara Masimba, who ran in a different ward. She's running for alderwoman. He was running for alderman. He will not be going to the general election, but the whole impetus of his and her campaign, which were campaigns for reparations to the African community and for political power in the hands of the African working class in North St. Louis. They're amazing. And this is absolutely historic. They have to win. President Kalambai has to win. And you can contribute to her campaign by going to Vote Kalambai. Is it .org? VoteKalambai.org. And you spell that. That's BOTE. Could somebody put that in the chat? KALAMBAYI.org. VoteKalambai.org. Thank you. And just contribute to her campaign. Oh my gosh, this corrupt, vicious city, to have somebody of integrity that has the interests of the people and not the developers, and they're not part of the neo-colonialists that could go into that city hall. Oh my God, it's amazing. And she is brilliant. She's dynamic and much loved by the community. So she is winning, and let's make it happen. Contribute to her campaign. Uhuru.
Thank you, Chairwoman Penny. So we're going to close out soon. I just have a couple of quick announcements. So first one is that tune in for a special live episode of Reparations in Action radio show this Friday, March 12th, launching at 3 o'clock Eastern in the afternoon, which is part of the Black Power 96 Radio Spring Fund Drive. And this will feature interviews with Mr. Eddie Maltby, Black Power 96 Radio Assistant Station Manager and the world's best blind DJ, and Sandra Forrest, APSC member and Black Power 96 Radio volunteer, discussing the work to archive the audio-visual recordings of the party's campaigns. And there will be special thank you gifts and give backs, including some tote bags printed right here from Uhuru Planet Reparations Apparel. So when you donate at certain levels to Black Power 96 Radio. So tune in St. Petersburg, Florida at 96.3 FM, or streaming online anywhere in the world at blackpower96.org. Or there's an app for your phone. You can download it. It's called Black Power 96 mobile app. It's really awesome. So our next announcement is that next week, Reparations in Action radio show series called White Lies Shattered continues on. This eye-opening series looks at history from the perspective of African and other colonized people, smashing all the myths perpetuated by white power. You can tune in Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Black Power 96 Radio, and also on demand at uhrusolidarity.podbean.com. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, you can search for White Lives Shattered. It's really good. You got to listen to it. On our next announcement on Wednesday, March 17th, 6 p.m. Pacific time, that's 9 p.m. Eastern in the evening, join us for a dynamic web event hosted by the Make Wall Street Pay Reparations campaign of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And this, the webinar is called Big Tech, it's about how big tech in Silicon Valley profits from the plunder and genocide of African people. And this will feature a speaker from the African People's Socialist Party, Western Regional Representative Bakari Olatunji, and APSC member Maureen Wagner. And you can register right now. You got to register now, tinyurl.com/makebigtechpay. Someone should put that link in the comments too. Next announcement on Saturday, April 3rd, 5 of Philadelphia's finest musicians will gather virtually for the Rock for Reparations concert. I'm part of organizing that. It's really excellent. Organized by Mary, a USM member in Philly, and it's going to be awesome. So you got to register now, tinyurl.com/rock4reparations, and meet these amazing, talented artists. Next announcement, the USM National Convention called Make Wall Street Pay Reparations. That is the theme of our 2021 convention this year. It's going to be on Zoom, so you can tune in from anywhere in the world, April 17th and 18th that weekend. You can register at uhrusolidarity.org/register. And every Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern time, tune into the hashtag Omali Taught Me Sunday Studies, live from the chairman's Facebook page, as well as the Burning Spear TV YouTube channel. And just last quick announcement, if you want to support Uhuru Planet Reparations Apparel, we are the institution of APSC. So maybe if you're not ready to become a member, but you still want to support, go to uhuruplanet.com. You can get your APSC merch and other buttons, and you got it. I'll send it to you tomorrow. You got to check us out. So, okay, so that is all. Oh, other events you can, we have constant events throughout the movement. You can go to theburningspear.com/events to see our international events calendar, and make sure to visit uhrusolidarity.org and apscuhuru.org to learn more about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, to learn more about the African People's Solidarity Committee, and how you can become a member and join the work to build white solidarity with Black power and unity through reparations. So thank you so much, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and to everyone for participating tonight. That concludes our events. Uhuru, reparations now, and we will see you next time. Uhuru.
Hello.